Well, as we take stock of this tragedy in Tumbler Ridge, memories from one of Canada's very first school shootings are front of mind for a friend of this show. That's Anne McGrath, the former director of the Federal New Democratic Party. McGrath was in classroom 71 at St. Pius X High School in Ottawa on October 27, 1975, when a high school student entered and opened fire. 18-year-old Mark Huff was among those injured. He died in hospital over a month later. 17-year-old Kim Rabot was also killed earlier that day. The shooting at this Ottawa high school more than 50 years ago helped pave the way for new federal gun control measures, and Anne McGrath joins me now. Anne, good to see you.
Nice to see you. Tough day.
I've known you for 10 I had no idea about this part of your history. When you're listening to everything today, I mean, what was it like seeing this, having this in your past?
Well, it's hard any time, and there have been a lot of school shootings in the years since ours, and it's always really hard to watch it and to kind of almost re-experience everything. But I'm not surprised that you had no idea, because most people had no idea, because 50 years ago nobody talked about these things. The message always was to move on, to get past it, to not bring it up. And so I have actually lived most of my life not talking to people about it, and and I have close friends and colleagues who have no idea that this happened.
I don't know how far you want to go in reliving it, so you know, if you don't want to with specific questions, I get that. But were you in the school when this happened, or were you in the class?
I was in the classroom. I was in the classroom when the door was kicked open and the shooter started firing off a sawed-off pump-action shotgun. Right,
and well, I mean, my God, I don't even know. I mean, were you hurt? You saw obviously everything that happened there.
Yes, absolutely.
And this was like, we're now talking about counselors and surging, and that was not the way it was in 1975.
It absolutely wasn't the way it was, and things are so different now. Even in the experience of that day, I mean, there was no social media, so we had no idea what was going on. We had no idea if there were shots coming from both the doorway and outside or anything like that. So in order to get out of the classroom, a bunch of the students picked up chairs and desks and started smashing the windows, which made some of us, me in particular, for instance, feel like, oh, they're shooting from the outside now.
Right.
And so, you know, kind of to hit the deck again. And then when we finally did leave, there was nowhere to go. So I remember, for instance, walking down the back streets by myself and hiding behind trees and bushes every time a car would come by, in case there were shooters everywhere.
Like, my kids are 9, and actually it's my oldest 12th birthday today, excuse me. They do lockdown drills.
Yes.
You know, at their school here in Ottawa, and you think of it as a hypothetical thing, but like, you can see the value in it when you look at the orderly barricading and the stay in place that we saw in Tumbler Ridge, and how they waited for the police to tell them to come out, and the contrast with what you have just described with just wandering the streets of Ottawa as a high school student.
Yeah, it was total chaos. We were like zombies, and we scattered, and we, you know, I remember going to the police station later that night to give a witness statement or whatever it was, not realizing that I had, you know, blood and brains in my hair, and you know, it was just it was an unreal experience, you know, and I don't think you ever feel completely safe after something like that. So it's always hard, even hearing when these things happen, whether it's in Canada or anywhere else, whether it's Columbine, Virginia Tech, Parkland, any of these places, you do relive it. But I do notice some differences, for sure. I mean, I do think that, you know, that the response is much better now. The presence of counselors, I noticed, for instance, in Tumbler Ridge that the school is closed for the week, which is, you know, we went back to school the next day.
What?
Yeah, we went back to school the next day.
Okay. So
I think it's what people thought was the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah, look, and look, what is the right thing to do, right? In these unimaginable moments. But you said you were wondering, you said you have blood, like you were in the blast radius, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
I mean, how did you deal with it, right? Because then we just had a conversation with, you know, with a psychological professional, talking to the teachers union about all the supports people are going to need, but you didn't have any of that. So it's like, how did you process it, or did you?
I don't think I did. I think I remember finding it very hard to ever have my senses cut off. So, for instance, having a shower was out of the question because you can't hear anything. So I'd have to have, baths or whatever. I remember, like not being able to sleep without the lights on for quite a long time, months, I would say. And I would say even still, I do things like I make sure that my desk is always facing the door. I check exits when I walk into any space. I either overreact or completely don't react to loud noises or commotions. So I either have a startle response, but like a backfiring of a car or something like that, or I will myself not to react when something's happening.
So when you think about how you just kind of had to deal with this on your own, I think it's fair to say, right? Yeah. Back in 1975, these kids in Tumbler Ridge, I mean, what do you hope is there for them? What do you think they're going to need today, tomorrow, and the days after that?
I think they're going to need people to be compassionate, obviously, and to.
Here, we got the. I need these more and more. So they're there if you need them.
So I think we need people to be compassionate, but to recognize that everyone is an individual, and so some of them will want to talk a lot. Some of them will not want to talk at all, and I think that. It's very hard. I believe now, I have more compassion now that I'm older. I believe that it is very hard for the family and friends who were not there or who experienced it sort of secondhand to know what to do. And so I kind of look back now with compassion on the fact that I was filled with rage and fear. And my parents and my siblings and others were probably walking on eggshells around me for who knows how long, because they didn't want to say the wrong thing. They, when there was a door slammed and I jumped, I would get mad, at everything, because I was just so angry about what had happened.
It was remarkable, but then it also reminded me as I was reading about this incident today. It happened here in Ottawa. I was, 2 or 3 years old when this happened, so it was not something I saw and remembered. But the fact that the shooter bought the gun at a department store in the Byward Market, right? And I was like, how could that happen? But then I remember back, in the 80s growing up, you could buy guns at Kmart. It was Woolco, I think it was at the time, not even, and this moment helped change a lot of that, right? What do you make of where things are now because of it all?
Yeah, no, I mean, he bought the gun at a Giant Tiger store in the Byward Market, and he modified it, he sawed it off to make it pump action, so that the gun would spread, spatter. And there was a kind of a shock, obviously, in the community, and people just almost, I don't know if it was a deliberate program, but I remember people like coming in droves to drop off their guns at the police station. There were stories about it. People were coming in, and there were, I saw the shots of police standing there with the piles of guns on a table in front of them, right? And people were shocked at the fact that he had bought it at a discount store. And we were like, I was 17 at the time, so he would have been 17 or 18. He was a classmate. He sat in front of me in algebra class for years, and I think people were wanted to do something about that. And there were some changes that were made then around licensing and regulation of firearms. And I think every time that there is an incident like this, there's a kind of more of an impetus to actually to do more, to try and find ways to make sure that these things don't happen again. I mean, even just listening to the little bit that I've heard today, there are some clear warning signs and some clear things that, like, you wonder how there were guns in that house.
Yeah, and there were guns that were taken, returned to the rightful owner. Don't know if that means they went back to the house, and we don't know where he got the weapons today. Right. So but I take your point, right? Like that there were constant interactions that were warnings. But you said you went back to school the next day. I don't know how they're going to go back to school or when they're going to go back to school in Tumbler Ridge. I mean, did it ever get to a point, Anne, where it felt normal? Because at that age, like, school is everything for you, right? It is the center of your social life, your activity life, and the core function of your routine. was it ever normal for you?
I don't know if normal would be the word, because I do remember being in class, for instance, and you know, if the door opened quickly or something, some of us would duck for months afterwards. And you know, I remember the day that the inquest opened was the day that Mark Huff actually died. And we had actually a paper due that day on the meaning of tragedy.
Oh my God.
Shakespeare's Hamlet. And I remember having to go up to the English teacher and ask him for an extension to the Monday. That was on a Friday, asking for an extension to the Monday on the paper.
To the Monday?
Yes.
48 hours was enough time. You have to laugh almost because there's a gallows humor component to it all.
Absolutely, yeah. It was so. I mean, I don't think normal, but you know, you do like adjust, I guess, you know, and you do like you keep going to school and you keep, you know, writing papers and doing exams, and you know, the next year I went to university, and you know. But you're aware of things that probably other people your age are not aware of. Things like I said, like of, you know, when a door opens and you're not expecting it to, or where you're sitting in a room, or any of those kinds of things.
Well, what about your views now, like as an adult, and you know, looking back at how you view, like, you know, I've maintained some relationships from high school, lost other relationships from high school, the normal drifting away. I mean, how does it work, or how has it worked with you and your classmates, many of whom went through something that is completely unimaginable?
Well, it is strange. You know, like we do have we've had one reunion. We're having another one coming up. We had a mass, actually. I'm not religious anymore, but we did have a mass that I went to the week of the anniversary in late October.
It was 50 years, October passed.
Yeah, October 27th was the 50th anniversary, and we had a mass around then in memory of Mark Huff, who was the student who died. One of the ones that died, and we, you know, it was a, you know, people were sad and happy, you know, like we were happy to see each other, and we know each other, and you know, we kind of have contact on and off with different people, but. Right. But I don't think you ever, you know, I remember when the Montreal massacre happened, I did a media interview with Barbara Frum, and I was in Calgary at the time, and one of the students who I had been close to in the class phoned me, and you know, like from Ottawa, and was like, oh my goodness, you know, we never talked about this, and it was so great that you did, you know, so.
It's, you know, St. Pius X. There was a St. Pius X in St. John's in the old Catholic school system when I was growing up. Everyone just called it Pius, right?
Yes, that's right, because we called it here too, Pius.
But how do you talk about it much with the classmates when you get together, or is it like a shared thing that you kind of acknowledge but don't dwell on?
I would say it's more of a shared thing, and it sometimes comes up, because I know people and I see them, you know, and we don't talk about it. But occasionally we will kind of make a reference to it. And again, I think that is something that might change for people now, because the difference in how we respond to these things is just astronomical. Look, we had, they brought counselors in, I think it was maybe 4 months afterwards. It was after Christmas, I know. It was like February or March. And I went to one session with the counselor during school, and it was one counselor who had been brought in, and there were 4 or 5 of us in a group in the class, in the session with the counselor. And I can tell you, I did not say one word in that session.
Just closed off.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, it is better now. The unfortunate thing is that it took so many tragedies to learn the lessons, right, of how to respond to it. And you know, someone had mentioned to me that you were part of an active shooting, and I thought of the Parliament Hill shooting.
Yes, I was involved in that too.
Because you were there, right?
Yeah.
Like you were working for, because I was still working in St. John's at the time, and I remember interviewing Jack Harris when I was hosting Here and Now, the supper hour show back in Newfoundland, and about being barricaded in the caucus rooms and people being barricaded in the office. We were talking to the Newfoundland and Labrador MPs, and I mean, that must have been awful for you, being in the middle of that after everything you went through in high school. It
was, and it was strange because, for one thing, I knew what was going on, which is different from 50 years ago. I knew that those were shots that were being fired. At first, in Pius, I wasn't even aware that they were shooting, that it was a shooting. But I knew that those were gunshots, and I was at the front of the caucus room making a presentation. There was a bullet that actually came right through the door in front of me, and then we all got rushed out to a side room, and then they rushed us back into the room that we had been in, the caucus room. And I remember lying on the floor in the translation booth and thinking, how does this happen to somebody twice?
I know.
So.
I know.
Yeah.
It is these remarkable accidents of history. I know 4 people from my hometown who are in the towers or entering the towers on 9/11.
Yep.
And it's just, they're all alive. They all survived. But it's just, it is these cosmic things that I regret to say I had no idea you'd been through that, Anne. And I want to thank you just for your generosity and openness to come on and talk about it on a day like this, right? That it's hard, but it can be overcome. And
well, I will say one other thing, and that is social media. There's a lot of problems with social media, but I'll tell you, in the Parliament Hill shooting, I was very grateful for the fact that I had a phone.
Yeah.
Because I could find out what was going on. I could communicate with family and friends, and that was very different from 50 years ago.
Well, Anne, it's always great to have you on the show. Look forward to having you back in the normal punditry role. Anne McGrath, thank you so much.
Thank you.